Millionaire arrives home early and almost faints at what he sees. Cold Seattle wind swept through fog-covered streets as Ethan Wallace stepped out of the glass tower where he had just finished a meeting with Japanese investors. It was only 4:30 in the afternoon, much earlier than he usually left the office. A strange, unexplainable instinct urged him to go home, as if something there was waiting for him. His house stood on Queen Anne Hill, all oak and glass, serene like every expensive home in the area. Yet since Julia, his wife, had died in a car crash 6 months ago, that house had become a hollow, freezing place. Only Lily, their 4-year-old daughter, remained, silent, withdrawn, and voiceless since that fateful day. Ethan had taken her to the best child psychologists in Seattle, even to specialists in California, but they all said the same thing. She needs time. Time. A thing money could never buy. Today, he decided to come home early. He didn't know why, only that something pulled him there. When his car stopped in front of the wooden gate, his heartbeat quickened. He opened the door and stepped inside. The house was as quiet as ever, until he heard a sound he thought he had forgotten. A soft voice drifted from the kitchen, a young woman's gentle, tender singing. "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." And Ethan froze. In the bright white kitchen, he saw Lily sitting on the shoulders of the housemaid. The two of them were washing dishes together, humming and laughing. Ethan could hardly believe his eyes. For 6 months he hadn't seen his daughter smile. Yet now she was smiling, laughing, and singing along with the woman. Grace Miller, the new nanny who had started only weeks ago. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, his heart pounding wildly. Lily turned and met her father's gaze. For a moment she froze, and then her clear little voice rang out. "Daddy!" Just one word, but for Ethan it was a miracle. His throat tightened, his knees nearly gave out. Grace quickly set Lily down, startled. "I'm sorry, sir. I just wanted her to have some fun," she stammered. Ethan turned away quietly, hiding the tears that had begun to fall. For the first time in months, he wasn't grieving. He was grateful. For the first time in months, the house was alive again, with the sound of life. That night, Ethan sat alone in his study. The amber light reflected off the glass of whiskey in his hand, casting his shadow on the bare wall. Lily's laughter still echoed in his mind, like a distant melody. For 6 months he had lived in silence, the heavy kind of silence that fills a house after the woman who once gave it life is gone. He looked up at the photo on his desk. Julia, with her radiant smile and golden hair falling softly over her shoulders. The picture had been taken at Discovery Park last summer, the day Lily ran around the grass while Julia called after her, laughing, "Careful, baby, you'll fall." Ha! Only a year had passed, and everything had shattered. The accident happened on a rainy afternoon. The car had lost control. Julia didn't survive. From that day on, Lily stopped speaking, not because of any physical injury, but because the pain was too deep to put into words. Ethan had tried to mend that silence, but every time he entered the room, Lily went quiet again. Yet when Grace was around, the little girl would sing, talk, and laugh. At first, Ethan felt nothing but joy. But the more he watched, the more a subtle jealousy crept into his heart. Grace was just a young woman from Oregon with no psychology degree, no special training. And yet she managed to do what he couldn't. In the following days, Ethan began coming home earlier than usual. He said nothing to Grace, simply watched from afar. From the doorway of his office, he saw her turn every ordinary chore into a joyful lesson for Lily. When folding clothes, she talked about colors. When cooking, she had Lily count the carrots. When setting the table, she taught her to recognize shapes. "Look, sweetheart, this plate is round like the moon, isn't it? And this napkin, It's square, just like a birthday gift box." Lily's laughter filled the kitchen, her cheeks rosy, her eyes shining. Ethan stood still, a bittersweet ache swelling in his chest. He had once been the one who made her smile like that. No longer. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Ethan sat with Grace in the living room. "Grace," he said hoarsely, "thank you. I don't know how you did it, but she's talking again." Grace smiled, though her eyes softened. "Honestly, Mr. Wallace, I didn't do anything special," she said quietly. "I just listened to her." Ethan frowned slightly. "Listened?" "Yes," Grace replied. "When children are grieving, they don't need someone to teach them how to forget. They just need someone to sit beside them, not to force, not to question, just to let them know they're not alone." Her words left Ethan silent for a long time. He realized that he had been too focused on fixing Lily with logic, too busy trying to repair her pain, and had forgotten that sometimes what a child needs most is simply the warmth of someone who listens. When Grace stood and walked toward her room, Ethan remained there, staring at the doorway where Lily's laughter had once echoed. For the first time, he felt something stir within him. Hope. A feeling he thought had died with Julia. He didn't yet know that from that very moment, his own wound had begun to heal. Slowly, quietly, through the gentle presence of that simple young woman. In the days that followed, the house on Queen Anne Hill seemed transformed. Lily's small laughter echoed every morning, blending with the soft tunes from the old kitchen speaker Grace liked to play while she cleaned. The once cold mansion now felt strangely warm, alive again. But not everyone was happy about it. The only one who didn't smile was Mrs. Eleanor Brooks, the housekeeper who had served the Wallace family for over 20 years. She had cared for Ethan since he was a child, watched him grow, build his career, and lose his wife. To Eleanor, this house was her domain, and Ethan was like her own son. So when Grace arrived, young, gentle, and adored by Lily in a way no one else was, something unsettling awoke in the older woman's heart. Suspicion. One morning, while Grace was showing Lily how to fold clothes in the living room, Eleanor entered, holding a dish towel. "Miss Miller," she said sternly, "I don't believe that part of the work falls under your responsibility." Grace turned, slightly confused. "What do you mean, ma'am?" "You were hired to clean and look after Miss Lily, not to educate her. Don't forget your boundaries." Lily looked between them, puzzled. "But Mrs. Brooks, Miss Grace was just showing me how to fold my shirt." Eleanor gave a thin smile. "I'm not saying you can't learn, sweetheart. I'm saying there are things best left to the adults to decide." The air in the room grew heavy. Grace said nothing, lowering her head as she continued folding. But deep in her eyes, something wounded flickered. That evening, when Ethan came home, he immediately sensed something was off. Lily wasn't chattering as usual. Grace avoided his gaze, and Eleanor busied herself in the kitchen more than necessary. A faint unease settled in his chest. A few days later, Ethan happened to overhear a conversation in the kitchen. Eleanor's voice was low and cold. "Miss Miller, I know your type. You're not just here for the job. You're trying to make Mr. Wallace believe you're special." "I'm not like that, Mrs. Brooks," Grace replied softly. "Don't be naive. Women like you come and go, leaving chaos behind. I won't let you do that to this child." Ethan froze behind the door, anger rising in his chest. Grace's voice trembled, though she tried to stay calm. "I only want to help Lily. I have no other intentions." "Help?" Eleanor's tone hardened. "Do you not understand that becoming too attached will only hurt her? When you leave, and you will leave, she'll lose another person she loves." After that conversation, Ethan began to see that two worlds were colliding under his own roof. One was the world of warmth and openness that Grace had brought into Lily's life. The other was the world of fear and restraint that Eleanor had guarded for years. One afternoon, when Ethan returned home early, he stumbled upon a sight that stopped him in his tracks. Grace and Lily were in the garden, laughing together as they picked flowers. "Look, Daddy," Lily held up a red rose, smiling brightly. "Miss Grace says red roses mean Mommy's love." The words hit Ethan like a wave. How long had it been since Lily had spoken about Julia? His heart tightened. In his daughter's innocent smile, he felt something blooming, a miracle rising from pain. Eleanor stood nearby, watching the scene with a conflicted gaze, part anger, part helplessness. That night, Ethan sat alone in his study for a long time, the memory of the red rose still vivid in his mind. He understood then. Grace wasn't replacing Julia. She was bringing his daughter back from the world of silence, and perhaps, little by little, she was bringing him back to life as well. The tension inside Ethan Wallace's house was no longer something that could be hidden. On the surface, everything appeared normal. Lily still laughed, Grace still worked diligently, and Eleanor remained attentive to every detail. But beneath that calm facade, a quiet current of suspicion was spreading, slowly but steadily. Eleanor, who had spent her entire life believing that everything must follow order and rules, felt that the young woman was disrupting the familiar rhythm of the household. It wasn't just because Grace was too close to Lily, but because she sensed something else between Grace and Ethan, something faint, undefined, yet deeply unsettling. One late afternoon, while Ethan was still at the office, Eleanor opened the laundry cabinet to look for towels and accidentally found a small box hidden beneath Grace's folded clothes. Inside were a few old photographs, some letters, and a neatly folded sheet of paper. When she opened it, her breath caught. It was a diploma in education from the University of Oregon. She froze. She has a college degree, and she's working as a maid? The thought deepened every suspicion in her mind. That evening, she waited for Ethan to return. The moment he stepped through the door, she spoke up. "Mr. Wallace, I believe you should know something about Miss Miller." Ethan set his briefcase down, looking at her with tired eyes. "What is it, Mrs. Brooks?" Eleanor placed the document on the table. "I found this in her room. She has a teaching degree. But she never told you, did she?" Ethan frowned, glanced at the diploma, then looked back at her. "And what exactly does that mean?" "It means she lied about who she is. Educated women don't take jobs as maids unless they're hiding something. I fear she's trying to build a perfect image to gain your trust, and your daughter's." Ethan exhaled deeply. "You're overstepping, Mrs. Brooks." "I'm only protecting this family," Eleanor insisted, her tone firm. "I've seen women like her before. They come with smiles and leave behind tears." He was silent for a moment, then said quietly, "All right, I'll talk to her." That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Ethan knocked on Grace's door. She opened it, startled to see him. "Do you need me to clean something, Mr. Wallace?" "No, I just need to talk." He placed the diploma on the table. Grace's eyes widened, her face turning pale. I can explain." "I'm listening." Her voice trembled. "I didn't mean to hide it. After I graduated, my father lost his job, and my mother left. I had 3 younger siblings to care for. I had to earn money right away, so I took any work I could find, cleaning houses, waiting tables, anything. I didn't have time to look for a proper teaching position." "Why didn't you tell the truth?" Grace lowered her eyes, her voice softening. "Because teaching experience doesn't help when you're applying to be a maid. People would think I had ulterior motives, or that I'd quit soon. I just wanted a stable job." Ethan looked at her for a long moment. The anger in his gaze had faded, replaced by something gentler, a mixture of sympathy and respect. "You have 3 siblings?" "Yes. Ben is 17, Noah 12, and Emma 8. I'm their sister, and their mother." He nodded slowly. "You've done more than most people ever could, but you know, hiding things still creates a crack in trust." Grace bowed her head. "I understand. If you want me to leave, I will." Ethan replied softly, "I'm not dismissing you. I just wanted the truth." In that moment, he felt the contradiction within himself, the reason of a man trying to protect his family, and the quiet admiration rising in his heart for the young woman who had survived so much with such quiet strength. In the days following that conversation, Ethan grew quieter than usual. He hadn't fired Grace, but he never brought up the subject again. The atmosphere in the house felt subdued, though Lily still chattered happily whenever she played with Grace. One afternoon, when Ethan returned from the office, he paused at the doorway of the living room. Before him was a scene of gentle peace. Grace and Lily sat cross-legged on the floor, stacking colorful wooden blocks. "What shape is this one, Lily?" Grace asked softly. "Triangle," the little girl squealed. "That's right, and if we put 3 triangles together, what do we get?" "A star?" Lily's laughter rang through the room. Ethan leaned against the doorframe, his heart tightening. With nothing more than a handful of wooden blocks, that young woman was rebuilding his daughter's world, one piece at a time. That evening at dinner, Ethan tried to start a conversation with his child. "So, Lily, what did you learn today?" She smiled brightly. "Miss Grace said red roses mean love, and yellow daisies mean joy. I want to plant both in our garden." Ethan chuckled softly, but emotion swelled in his chest. "Then tomorrow, let's plant them together." Lily's eyes widened in surprise. "Really, Daddy?" "Really. You pick the flowers, and Daddy will dig the holes." The next morning, Seattle's sky was cool, sunlight glimmering through the clouds. Ethan and Lily went out into the garden together. He wore his old gardening gloves, still dusty from disuse, while Lily wore the pink wool hat Julia had once bought for her. From a distance, Grace watched silently, smiling to herself. Ethan dug small holes while Lily carefully placed the rosebuds into the soil. "Miss Grace said when you plant flowers, you have to make a wish," Lily whispered. "What did you wish for, sweetheart?" "I wish Mommy could hear me talk." Ethan froze, his throat tightening. The breeze swept through the garden, carrying the scent of damp earth and blooming roses. He said softly, "I believe she can hear you, my love." The little girl looked at him, then wrapped her tiny arms around his neck. For the first time in months, Ethan felt real warmth from his daughter again. That evening, after Lily had gone to sleep, Grace brought him a cup of tea. "Thank you for today," she said quietly. She was so happy. "No," Ethan replied in a low voice. "It's I who should thank you. I'd forgotten what it felt like to really talk to my child." Grace sat down across from him. "You didn't forget," she said softly. "You're just learning again." Ethan looked at her, and for a moment something unspoken passed between them. A quiet understanding, tender and profound, as if both were sharing the same sorrow and finding peace in healing someone else. A few days later, Lily's psychologist, Dr. Ellen Hartman, called to say she wanted to visit the house to assess the girl's progress. Ethan agreed. That afternoon, Dr. Hartman arrived, calm, composed, and professional. She and Ethan entered the living room where Lily and Grace were baking cookies together. Flour covered their hands, the table, even Lily's hair, while laughter filled the kitchen like sunlight. Dr. Hartman watched for 15 minutes before speaking softly to Ethan. "She's made remarkable progress. And that young woman." She glanced toward Grace. "She has a rare natural gift. She's not trying to fix the child. She's simply with her." Ethan nodded. "She's done something I thought no one could." "And that's a beautiful thing," the doctor said gently. "But remember, she isn't replacing Lily's mother. She's opening the door that allows Lily to return to her father. Those words echoed in Ethan's mind all night. For the first time, he understood that Grace hadn't just saved his daughter. She had brought him back to being a father. As he passed Lily's room later that evening, he saw Grace sitting by the bed, reading softly to the little girl. And Ethan knew then. The healing had truly begun. Since Dr. Hartman's visit, the atmosphere in the Wallace house had grown lighter. Lily talked more, laughed more, and had even started attending preschool again at a nearby kindergarten. For the first time in months, Ethan felt a quiet sense of peace. Grace, as always, worked softly and steadily, moving through the house like a natural part of it. But Eleanor Brooks was not at ease. The suspicion inside her had never truly faded. One Thursday afternoon, while Ethan was still in a meeting, Eleanor called him, her voice tense. "Mr. Wallace, I need to speak with you. I've discovered something serious." Ethan frowned. "What is it this time, Mrs. Brooks?" "The address Miss Miller listed on her employment form. It isn't real." A long silence followed on the other end of the line. "Are you certain?" "I had it checked. No one named Grace Miller has ever lived there. The area was cleared out nearly a year ago." Ethan sighed, rubbing his forehead. Once again, doubt knocked on his door. That evening, he came home earlier than usual. As he stepped inside, he saw Grace and Lily in the kitchen, cooking Lily's favorite meal, pasta with cream sauce. "Smells good," he said, trying to keep his tone natural. "Thank you." "We're making Lily's favorite," Grace smiled, but her smile faded when Ethan placed a sheet of paper on the table. "I checked the address you gave in your file." Grace froze. "You checked?" "Yes, and no one named Grace Miller ever lived there." Her face turned pale, her hands trembled. "I can explain." "I'm listening," Ethan said, his tone colder than usual. Grace swallowed hard and took a deep breath. "I did live there, until last month. When the landlord raised the rent, my siblings and I couldn't afford it anymore. We had to move out." "Where are you living now?" She lowered her head, her voice barely audible. "In a temporary housing complex downtown. It's meant for homeless families. It's not official, but it's the only place we could go." Ethan went silent. "And you didn't tell me because you were afraid I'd fire you?" She nodded faintly. "Yes, people from those places are often seen as troublemakers or unsafe. I just wanted to keep this job. I have to take care of my siblings." "They're real then?" he asked, his voice softer but still firm. "Of course," Grace said, tears glistening in her eyes. "Ben is 17, Noah 12, and Emma 8. You can meet them if you'd like." Ethan sat quietly for a long time. His gaze lingered on her face, tired, honest, stripped of any pretense. In her trembling voice, he heard something he hadn't heard in months. Truth without fear. Finally, he said quietly, "I'd like to meet them." Grace flinched slightly. "There's no need, Mr. Wallace. I don't want you to see that place." "I need to." On Saturday morning, Ethan drove with Lily in the back seat. Grace sat beside him, hands clasped tightly in her lap, silent the whole way. When they arrived at an old building in downtown Seattle, its paint peeling, stair rails rusted, Ethan said nothing. They climbed 3 flights of stairs to a small metal door. Grace knocked softly. "Ben, open up. It's me." Chin. The door opened to reveal a tall, slender teenager with kind eyes. "Hello, sir. I'm Ben, Grace's brother." Inside, the apartment was tiny but spotless. A small wooden table, a few chairs, a bunk bed in the corner, and a study desk piled with books. On the floor, 2 younger kids, Noah and Emma, were doing homework. Emma looked up and smiled brightly at Lily. "Hi, I'm Emma. Do you like drawing?" "Yes, I can draw roses really well," Lily replied excitedly. The 2 girls became fast friends. Ethan looked around. The room was poor but warm, tidy and full of care. On the wall, several school certificates were taped up with worn strips of tape. Ethan turned to Ben. "You're doing well in school?" "Yes, sir, I'm trying. I want to apply to a technical school, to study computers." Ethan nodded, admiration softening his features. He looked back at Grace, his voice low. "You've built a beautiful family." She bowed her head slightly. "We don't have much, but we have each other. That's enough." After a pause, Ethan looked around again and asked, "If I helped you find a better place, a safer one, would you accept it?" Grace hesitated. "I don't want charity." "It's not charity," Ethan said quietly. "It's gratitude for giving me back my daughter." She looked at him, tears slipping down her cheeks, her smile as gentle as a breeze. "If you truly want to help, let me repay you little by little. I don't want to owe anyone." Ethan nodded. "Deal." On the drive back, Lily sat in the back seat, holding Emma's hand through the window, promising to visit soon. In the rearview mirror, Ethan saw Grace staring out at the city, her eyes filled with relief mixed with quiet shame. But something inside him had shifted. He no longer saw her as just a housemaid, but as a courageous woman, fighting for her family with every ounce of her heart. After the visit to Grace's temporary housing, Ethan Wallace never looked at her the same way again. He finally understood that behind her calm demeanor and gentle smile lay a rare kind of strength, the strength of a young woman carrying an entire family on her small shoulders. The next day, Ethan began searching for a new home for Grace and her siblings. After several days, he found a small house in the suburbs of West Seattle, peaceful, safe, and just big enough for the four of them to live comfortably. When he handed her the keys, Grace was visibly moved, though her voice remained soft. "I'll pay you back little by little, no matter how long it takes." "There's no rush," Ethan replied. "Think of this as a new beginning." From that moment on, a new bond of trust formed between them, stronger than any words could express. But Eleanor Brooks could not accept it. She felt as though Ethan had fallen under the young woman's spell, and that the house she had once ruled with order and routine no longer belonged to her. One morning, as Ethan was preparing to leave for the office, Eleanor entered his study. "Mr. Wallace, I'd like to resign." Ethan looked up, surprised. "What? Mrs. Brooks? You've been with us for over 20 years." "I know, but things have changed. I no longer feel I belong here." He was silent for a moment before speaking quietly. "I don't want you to leave. You're part of this family." Eleanor shook her head, her eyes soft but sorrowful. "Perhaps I once was, but not anymore. That girl, Grace, she's good, I admit that, but I don't believe such goodness lasts." "You're wrong," Ethan said sincerely. "She's not just good, she's genuine, and because of her, this house has laughter again." Eleanor smiled faintly, a mixture of pride and hurt in her expression. "Then I should go, before I become unnecessary." The day Eleanor left, the entire house fell silent. Lily ran after her, tears glimmering in her eyes. "Please don't go, Grandma Eleanor. I'll miss you." "I'll miss you too, sweetheart. But sometimes grown-ups have to leave, so new things can begin." When the door closed, an old chapter of the house came to an end. For the first time in years, peace lingered in every corner, quiet, simple, and new. After that, life at the Wallace residence changed completely. Grace took on not only the household chores, but also began organizing the family's routines. Dinner was always served at 7 sharp. Lily had her reading hour and her playtime. And Ethan started coming home early to eat dinner with them, something he had never done before. One evening, as they sat together at the table, Lily looked up and said, "Miss Grace, tell the story about the princess who planted flowers." "What princess?" Ethan asked with a smile. "The one who lost her mother," Lily said eagerly. but she planted flowers to make sad people happy again. Grace laughed softly, her voice warm. That's right, and the princess discovered that when she made others smile, her own heart began to heal too. Ethan fell silent, watching them, a gentle warmth spreading through his chest. He realized that Grace wasn't just telling Lily a story, she was telling one to herself and to him as well. That night, after Lily had gone to sleep, Ethan stepped out onto the balcony. In the distance, he saw Grace arranging the flower pots Lily had planted that morning. Under the golden light, her hair glowed like honey. And Ethan realized the house that had once been a refuge for grief had become a true home again, all because of her presence. Spring laid a soft hue over Seattle. The long rains quietly retreated, making way for pale sunlight that filtered through early blooming cherry branches. From the porch, Ethan watched in silence. The laughter of his daughter mingled with Grace's gentle voice, light as the wind, and he realized the house was no longer a place that held pain, but one where life had returned. That afternoon, Lily wanted to bake cookies to bring to school. Grace smiled and agreed, and for the first time, Ethan rolled up his sleeves to help them. The three bustled around the kitchen, flour flying everywhere, the sweet smell of butter spreading through the air, laughter echoing in every corner. "Careful, Daddy! You've got flour in your hair," Lily squealed. "Daddy's not used to kitchen work," Ethan laughed, ducking away. "That's all right," Grace said, her eyes sparkling with quiet joy. "Everyone in this house can learn again from the beginning." The words were simple, but they stilled Ethan's heart. He looked at her, her brown hair falling loose, her cheeks flushed from the sun, her smile so genuine it made his pulse falter. He realized he was no longer just grateful to her, he was falling in love with her. That night, after Lily had gone to sleep, the garden still carried the scent of freshly bloomed roses. Seattle's moonlight cast a silver glow over the petals, shimmering like the breath of spring. Grace was watering the plants. When she saw Ethan step outside, she smiled softly. "You're still awake? It's cold out here." "I'm used to the cold," he replied, walking closer. A moment passed before his voice broke the quiet, low and rough against the sound of the breeze. "I once thought this house would always be just empty walls, but you did something I couldn't." Grace smiled faintly and lowered her gaze. "I only stayed beside Lily. She found her own voice again." Ethan shook his head, his eyes glowing with rare sincerity. "No, Grace, you didn't just save my daughter." He paused, taking a deep breath, then said slowly, "You saved me too." Grace looked at him, the moonlight reflected in her eyes like liquid silver. A silence stretched between them before she whispered, her voice trembling but warm. "Maybe we saved each other." Ethan stepped closer, only a breath apart now. Neither spoke another word. Amid the scent of roses and the silver glow of the moon, he leaned down and kissed her, softly, truthfully, and full of gratitude. It wasn't a kiss of passion, but of healing, two broken hearts finding warmth again. From the upstairs window, Lily gently lifted the curtain, her innocent eyes shining with joy. She smiled, a small, pure smile, and whispered to herself, "Now we really are a family." A year later, the Wallace garden was more radiant than ever. The rose bushes, once planted with tears and hope, now bloomed wide under the gentle sunlight, filling the air with a sweet fragrance, like memories brought back to life. Amid that garden, Ethan held Grace's hand. No longer the cold, distant businessman, he stood there, peaceful, simple, and real. Before them, Lily, dressed in a small white gown and holding a basket of petals, looked up with eyes shimmering with happiness. "Ready, sweetheart?" Ethan asked softly. "Always, Daddy." Music began to play. Lily tossed handfuls of bright red rose petals into the air, each one spinning in the sunlight like the traces of old wounds dissolving away. The wedding was simple, just a few close friends and family, surrounded by warmth and love. No luxury, no display, only sincerity and the joy of two souls who had found happiness after loss. That evening, the celebration took place right there in the garden. Golden light swayed gently from the trees, a guitar played softly, and laughter rippled through the air. Grace told her friends that she had just been accepted into a graduate program in child psychology at the University of Washington. Ethan, in turn, had cut his working hours in half to make more time for family, for the things that truly mattered. Grace's family, Ben, Noah, and Emma, were now part of the Wallace home. Every weekend dinner was loud, joyful, filled with food, warmth, and laughter. A family born from two different worlds, united by one heart. 2 years later, Grace gave birth to a baby boy. They named him Eli. Lily, now a proud big sister, held her baby brother in her small arms and sang softly, "You are my sunshine, my only sunshine." It was the very first song she had ever sung with Grace, the song that had once awakened her silent voice. One summer afternoon, as the whole family sat together in the garden, surrounded by the scent of roses, Lily looked up and asked, "Mommy, is Mommy Julia still in heaven?" Grace gently brushed the girl's hair, her eyes warm as the fading sunlight. "Your mommy never really left, sweetheart. Love doesn't disappear. It just changes places." Ethan squeezed Grace's hand and watched the children play under the golden sky. The house that had once been cold and hollow was now filled with laughter, blooming roses, and love, the kind that never leaves, only changes form.